All right, so today is January 4th, 2023. Happy New Year, everyone. As a reminder, this meeting is public, recorded, and posted on YouTube. So it looks like we've got a few agenda items already posted here. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. First up, we have from Deep, pull request 526. Deep, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, sure. So this is the PR around introducing this concept of runtime assisted mount in CSI. So we have a KEP going for it, and this PR captures the CSI specific changes that are needed. So the key enhancements that we cover is the CSI node plugins ability to surface to CO that it supports a bunch of different things. So it's mainly three at this point. The critical ones are the ability to defer file system operations, and additionally, the ability to defer what I'm calling post-mount management of the file system. So this mainly includes two things that are handled by the kubelet today after CSI plugin is done mounting the file system in the regular path. And this includes like application of the FS group and application of FS group with a certain change policy. So one sort of I guess not too great thing about this is we are seeping in a couple of Kubernetes specific concepts to a certain extent, although we can also say that FS group is sort of like a generic group, so it does not need to be Kubernetes specific. But essentially three capabilities for the node plugin to surface to the CO that, first it can handle overall deferral of FS mounts, and secondarily handle deferral of FS mounts and application of a certain FS group with a certain FS group change policy. So those are the three main capabilities. And beyond that, it's mainly passing down this Boolean flag for some of the CSI node operations, mainly four of them: publish volume, get volume stats, expand volume, and unpublish volume from the CO to the node plugin, indicating.
So Deep, can I ask a question?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is like an opt-in functionality for drivers, such that out of the box, any existing CSI driver will just not work with this functionality, and CSI vendors will have to decide, oh, I want to implement these extensions in order for any of this to work. That's the idea.
That's correct.
Okay, and then if there's any weird implementation details that make it hard or impossible for a particular CSI driver to implement this, they can just decide not to do it, or to work around whatever they have to inside their driver to make it work.
Yeah, that is correct. So so in the KEP, we detail a couple of different options. One is like, as we discussed in a different forum, like, the idea of a generic proxy that allows any CSI plugin to basically just get this flag and blindly pass it on to this proxy. And the proxy takes care of interacting with the runtime and, following a protocol with the runtime as detailed in the KEP. So that makes it somewhat simpler, but if for the CSI plugin author to implement this, but if the CSI plugin author decides they want a tighter handshake with the runtime for some reason, they are free to do so.
Right. Well, I was wondering if anyone considered a mode where you just use raw block volumes and put file systems on top of them for the situations where that's good enough. Because then the CSI driver has to do literally nothing if they already support raw block volumes, right?
Yes, we did explore that model where we try to say, inject like a sidecar in each pod that would kind of do something similar, like get the file system mounted. But that, like, doing that injection process in a generic way, like mutating each pod, that was it seemed pretty complicated, and it didn't quite work out in.
No, I totally trust that you thought it through, and I believe it. It's just the downside I see here is that out of the box, nobody will support this. And then, you know, maybe after 6 months, you get a handful of vendors, and after a year, you'll get another handful. But you run the risk of it always being some small subset of CSI drivers supporting this thing, and the majority of them just not doing anything, right? That's the risk to run. Okay, so if that's acceptable, then yeah, I agree. This is a very powerful and flexible way to do it that puts the control where it needs to be to get the best result. Oh, did I lose audio? I can't hear anything.
No, any other
Okay.
comments, concerns? Thanks for the comments there, Ben. Okay, so maybe as a next step, folks, if you can help review offline, that would be great. Take a look at this PR and see if you have any concerns with what's being proposed. Deep, anything else you want to add?
No. Yeah, would love to get some review feedback. There's some comments on the cap already, so it's pretty tightly coupled with the cap, so you might have an easier time following if like you kind of go through the cap, some of the diagrams there, and then read this PR. So
That's a good point. Thank you. And the cap is likely already linked there, right?
yeah, it's linked there.
Okay, perfect.
The enhancement. Yeah. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Deep. With that, we'll switch over to Xing's topic. Xing, volume group PR.
Right, so I updated it. Now I added a new group control service and removed all the volume group only RPCs. So we only have a volume group snapshot RPCs now. So that's James' comment, and he reviewed it. He's asking others to take a look as well. So if you guys can take a review it, that would be great. In the last meeting, we talked about compiling a questionnaire and then post some questions. I did started that, and I there was a Ben, you helped reviewing those questions, and Yang and others. But those questions are relevant if you have a volume group there. If you don't have one group, then I don't think we really need to ask those questions for now. So I will just put it on hold for now until folks get the chance to take a look of this the new group control service.
Well, but when you say have volume group, you mean groups of specifically what type?
So volume group, meaning that in my original design, I have a volume group specific structs or messages, right? So in the CSS spec, you have this message for the volume group. So now those are gone. So you don't really have a create volume group, delete volume group, those type of RPCs anymore. What we have is you have create volume group snapshot.
Right. Yeah. Because for snapshots, it's the kind of thing where you don't need a persistent group. You can just have an ephemeral thing. Like here's a list of volumes I want to snapshot together, and that usually works.
Right. This was also I think we talked about this one in last meeting. This was at the end we agreed. We just we don't have this generic group, but we will just have different types of group. Basically, for now we focus on volume group snapshot. In the future, we can work on replication group, but so we don't really have one generic volume group anymore because we couldn't really agree on that one. But also with this one, it will be easier to start with, so we don't have like so many new RPCs to be added at one time. So we just add those volume group snapshot specific RPCs. Yeah.
This feels like a nice bite-sized piece that will be easier to digest. I'm just curious. So drivers don't have to support it at all, right? They can just say, I don't support this, and then users can't use it. But if they do, right, and for whatever reason, a particular list of volumes can't be snapshotted, you can just return an error and
right,
do something.
They need, Right.
Okay, so then it's on the vendor to sort of document to their users how they need to set up their volumes such that a group of them can be snapshotted together and have it not fail. Right?
Right. Yes.
Okay. That's probably the best we're going to be able to do, I think, even though it leads, it's sort of a leaky abstraction. It would be nice if you could just snapshot an arbitrary group of volumes whenever you wanted. But given the way that this actually works, I think the capability and then allowing the driver to return an error if it can't is probably the best we can do.
Right. I think this is probably a better way just to get started.
I can already imagine how certain storage systems will implement this. It should be fine.
Oh, there's one question. Maybe I should just take a quick look. Sadi, if you open that PR, there's a comment at the end. There's a comment by James. I think this is the one thing that he want some feedback from others. So this is the one place. So now we have two separate servers, but in the, let's see. Well, actually, let me hold on. Let me take a look at my. So basically, there was one place where we need to say, is this snapshot part of a group or not? So for that one, I also added the capability. I think I initially added the capability in the initial volume controller service, but James was saying that he would prefer not to add a new service there. This meaning that if someone want to support, if the driver want to support this one, the driver will need to check the group controller service to see if that's available. Okay, let me see if this comment is clear. That was.
Wait, are you advocating for a separate service or against a separate service?
No, it's okay to have one service. It's just when you are so basically in the regular volume controller service, we when we created this volume group snapshot, we'll still have those individual snapshots created as part of it, and then I will add a group snapshot ID there. So let's see if I showed here group snapshot, right? So this is the one. Maybe it's easy for me to show it. Can I share the screen, Sad? All right, thanks.
Yep, go for it.
Okay, so this is what I mean, right? Well, so we do have this group control service. That's totally new thing. That's fine. All the new RPCs are added there. But in this original, this is the original controller service, right? So in the controller service, in this snapshot message, I added this field to indicate that this snapshot is part of a group, right? So I added this group snapshot ID to indicate that. Now for this one, we are going to, the driver is going to check the capability in the group controller service. So
is this an input or an output?
This is like when after the snapshot, after the group snapshot is created, you will have those. You will have those.
Okay. So
this
is
like
generated by the plugin.
Right, it's a response, right? So
Okay.
you should be able to check it. I guess the question is, I think initially I added a new capability inside the original volume controller service. So James was saying it's better to do it this way. So I changed it. This is basically, based on his comment, I changed it to check this one. So,
But what is, so this is output from the driver. Kubernetes could presumably store it in a CR, but what would it use that information for?
Kubernetes will have a CR. Yes, Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Kubernetes.
But will it ever
Mhm.
use that field to do something else?
We'll need to make sure that user don't go delete those snapshots, right? It's part of the group, right? So you don't delete it. You don't delete those individual snapshots if it has this group snapshot ID.
Oh, you're saying we're going to change the existing snapshot CR, add a new field.
Right, right. Yeah, that's in
And then,
Kubernetes.
okay, and if that snapshot is part of a group, then it's going to get this ID. Existing non-group snapshots will just have a blank field.
Correct.
When you try to delete a snapshot in Kubernetes, we'll have a safety check based on whether
Right.
this field is blank or not.
Right.
Are the contents meant to be meaningful or opaque?
This is meaningful. This is not opaque. This is a first class field, right? This is not like under parameters.
Right, but what is the format of the field if Kubernetes is meant
string.
to parse it or interpret it?
It's a string. It's group snapshot. It's a name. It's a string, right? So this is like
yeah, but I mean,
going to be like the name, like a
is
name.
it an opaque string?
It's not opaque. So this is going to be similar to what we always have for those, this is like the return side, right? Return side. So,
Right, I guess, right, but every field we return out of CSI, like the CO does something with it and passes it back in, or else we don't return it at all if it doesn't have a use.
well,
So, like,
it will be, no, it's going to use this to make sure that this is not, the snapshot is going to be not going to be deleted. That's the purpose of this.
But does this field get passed back in on the delete call? Like, how do you delete a group snapshot? Do you delete the individual members? Or
you need to delete, no, you need to delete them together, basically. You delete them together.
Okay. So there's going to be a delete group snapshot RPC where you supply this ID, and the understanding is all of the snapshots related to that group snapshot are going to get cleaned up together.
Right.
And okay, that sounds cool.
Okay, yeah, so this is the only thing that he was asking folks to take a look, I guess, just to see if there's any other opinion, but yeah. So yeah, so this is the only thing that I want to.
I mean, I'm just sitting thinking about it. Did you consider not putting that safety check in and just allowing people to delete the individual snapshots one by one?
Then you can't really use your group snapshot anymore, right? If you do that.
Right, but like it's simpler in the sense that it's really simplifies the cleanup process. You can just use existing RPCs. You don't have to have a new cleanup workflow. Like imagine a group snapshot.
Well, so I think this can be, we can make it like optional or something like can think about the detailed implementation can be optional. But I think it's important actually to have this so people don't get confused and thought it's just like a regular snapshot. It's not associated with a group. So we could make it like a webhook or something.
But like all of that safety could be implemented entirely on the CO side with no CSI knowledge at all, if that was a desired feature at the CO level, right? The CO could have its own IDs that it assigns to the group snapshots, and it could have its own interlocks to prevent someone from accidentally deleting part of it. Like at the CSI level, it really doesn't matter if you delete the individual member snapshots individually, if that's what you really want to do. I think that's what I'm trying to probe is does it make a difference at the CSI layer, or is this just a CO provided safety check?
Well, if we don't even provide this one, how do we connect this with the original? When you create a group snapshot, right? So you need to have something returned back. Then the
Kubernetes sidecar.
I cannot differentiate this snapshot from other snapshots, right? So I think this is like the only way to differentiate your snapshot is a part of this group, not just like any other independent snapshots, right? So you have this
But
association.
even if that is the case, like if the underlying storage system allows you to delete some but not all of the constituent volume snapshots, shouldn't like,
That's
I
what I'm
don't see any
saying.
reason to prevent that.
Maybe if we use a webhook, that webhook can be optional. Or we could also, if you are really concerned about, I have never seen this as a problem, but if you think this is a problem, we could even like add a capability to allow those like to be deleted individually. Maybe that's a separate capability.
Well,
if that's
I guess
designed.
I'm just proposing it. What if we saved everyone a lot of effort and didn't have a group snapshot delete and said you need to use the individual snapshot delete mechanism?
Otherwise, even like in Kubernetes, how do you manage them? I don't know how to manage them, right? How do I know?
I guess I'm going to need to read the CAP and see like what the CRs look like. But I'm imagining some structure where you have a group snapshot CR that is the thing that the user creates, the list of volumes, and then some controller sees that and in response creates a bunch of individual volume snapshot CRs with the group ID populated, and that causes snapshot sidecar to.
But where do you populate the group ID? I guess that's the thing, right? So I guess you could always have add more controls on top, but I think it's definitely easier to have this in, when at the return time, drive return this, then this will be the most direct way to show that, okay, so those are the
it creates opportunities for each CSI driver to do it differently and have different behavior and to have inconsistent implementations.
Well, if CSI driver supports this one, it should be able to generate a group snapshot ID. So why it has to be so differently? I mean, I think this way actually make it more consistent, right? So we just require the CSI driver to return this one. This way we don't, we just use this to associate the individual snapshot with the group snapshot.
All right, I guess I should read the
please read
James' comment and James might be onto the same idea that I'm thinking about now. For delete, could make it simpler.
No, that's not his comment. That's actually not really his comment. His comment is really when I initially made this change. I added an additional new capability in the volume controller service. That's his only comment is, can we just check the group control service? So which I made that change. So that's his only comment. At least that's from this round. Of course, he could have more comments later.
So this is a quick question. So the group ID here at the RPC level, is it different from the group at the Kubernetes API level, at the CR level?
Yeah, this is not exactly the same thing, right? So just like when you create snapshot, you give a name and you get an ID back, right? So it's all the same thing. Like you create a volume, you provide a volume name, and you get a volume ID, a volume handle from the sort of system. So that's similar here. That part is similar. We're just trying to be consistent.
Okay.
Yeah, but for the IDs that we currently generate, like the volume ID and the snapshot ID, those are used as the handle by which you delete them. And so if we're going to have a group snapshot delete, I agree, like you need an ID to pass to that thing so that you can delete it. And my only comment
that part is the same, Ben. That part is the same. We do have that.
But my only comment was we might not need a group snapshot delete, because you might just be able to delete the snapshots individually, in which case you actually don't need it. And any kind of safety that you want to provide in terms of preventing users from deleting,
but I actually
could be done on the CO entirely.
Well, but I think some storage system may not support that, right? They just delete it altogether. That's the thing. So maybe it makes sense to have that as a separate capability.
Well, we should.
That
I
is
think we
actually
should find
already
out.
a separate capability, right? So delete group snapshot, we do have a capability. So if they don't implement, well, they still need to do that because then we still need to have this delete anyway. Yeah.
There has to be a way to delete it. So I
Yeah,
wonder
so the
if there's any
capability is
storage
already there,
systems.
Ben. It's not like you can get rid of this capability. So this capability will always be there, and this is needed. You do need to have
Which
this
capability?
group snapshot.
Delete volume group snapshot. I think there's a way to design it such that you end up with a bunch of individual snapshots that are semantically guaranteed to be taken at the same time, but for every other purpose, they're treated like ordinary snapshots at the CSI layer. And you could get away with no additional IDs if you did it like that.
But I think it's
And
better
that would,
for the group snapshot. But I think it's better for the group snapshot to be deleted together. So if you believe there's a desire to delete them separately, we can make that possible. But I think I was just thinking if we needed some additional capability for that, because we can already delete individual snapshot, but you're basically saying that we don't want to prevent it. But I think that but I think that actually can be dangerous if someone do that. Just remove one snapshot and then you ended up. The people maybe they don't know, right? And then suddenly they have.
But that's the risk with deleting anything, right? You can delete a volume and that can be dangerous. You can delete an individual snapshot and that can be dangerous. I mean, deleting is just dangerous by its
right,
nature.
But well, but this is just adding one extra thing, right? So now we have this group concept. So but anyway, I think we definitely still need to delete volume group snapshot capability. I was just thinking that do we need one extra capability to say allow?
But what does it mean if
because
the
in my
capability
previous
there?
in my previous implementation, I don't think that's allowed. But if you think it's such a beneficial, we could maybe make a separate capability for that.
But I mean, do you know what I mean? What if someone supports creating group snapshots, but they don't support deleting group snapshots? Like then, how do you delete them?
Well, that's fine, right? If that's the case, what they can do is they can make this one empty, right? So because they somehow they have to supply this group snapshot ID, right? So they have some logic there. If they don't even have this thing, they can just return success, right? So if that's the case, they can go ahead and delete individual snapshot. At the end, they delete this volume group snapshot, which in their implementation, they just, maybe it's a no op or something, they just return success. They check if all the snapshots are deleted, if so, and then they return success. Otherwise, it's a failure because it's not empty. We cannot delete it. So definitely,
this is stuff the sidecar is going to have to deal with, right? Because if the driver doesn't support deleting the group snapshot and the user attempts to
no, what I'm
delete
saying
the
is they should still support delete volume group snapshot. I thought I don't think we should handle that in the sidecars. It should be driver capability, and then they can handle it.
But you know what I mean? Like if there's going to be a controller that's going to see that the volume group snapshot CR gets deleted and it's going to do something. And if the something that it's going to do is call the volume group snapshot delete RPC, then what will it do if the driver doesn't support that RPC?
If a driver does not support delete volume group snapshot, then it doesn't do anything, right? Just fails, just not supported. It's the same as.
Then how do you delete your group snapshots?
So what I'm saying is they should still support this. What they do is they just do a no op, right? So they have to delete the individual snapshots first and then delete this one as a no op.
Okay, but so what you're saying is we don't need a capability because it's mandatory.
The only thing I was thinking, like if we need to add a capability, if we add this capability, that means we do not use this webhook to prevent them from deleting individual snapshots. Because for other drivers, you really should not be deleting those individually. there could be problems.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I'm comfortable like using a capability to signal basically a behavior that should be implemented but has no effect on the actual RPC. But yeah, we can figure out what capabilities need to be there and whether delete is mandatory or not.
Yeah, I think this is
It's a tricky subject. Sorry, Saad.
I was going to say, yeah, I think this is an important clarification. We should probably discuss it more in the PR. I'm leaning a little bit towards Ben's point of view here, simply because I can imagine there would be CSI drivers of both kinds. CSI drivers that do have a volume group ID and cannot be deleted alone. And the other extreme, which would be CSI drivers who don't have a volume group ID for snapshots and expect that those volumes are handled individually. And I think there's no disagreement that both are possible. I think the disagreement is really on how to handle that and what is the more likely case. And I think it sounds like Xing is saying the more likely case is that you'll have a group ID. So let's first class that, make that the default. And I think Ben is saying, hey, let's, it actually makes the other case really complicated and requires us to add additional complicated logic. So maybe we should start with just having no group ID, allow users to delete individually, and then the CO can handle the case where they don't support that. I'm leaning a little bit towards Ben, but I'm not entirely.
But Saad, I don't think we can actually get away from the delete volume group snapshot RPC completely, because there are drivers, I know that you have to just delete all of them together, right? So if you're saying that's not even supported, then we are just completely do not support those cases.
That's so I buy that.
I have an idea. So I was just thinking, can we when we delete snapshot, can we say if you want to delete a snapshot, that is part of the group that we want to make sure you really know that. So you need to enter the group ID as well. So similar to, when you sometimes when you do something, remember they want you to type the name, make sure that you're really removing something, right? So I'm thinking maybe that would be one way to say, okay, so user knows what he or she is doing.
Yeah, those kinds of safety checks make sense at the UI level, but not at like the RPC level. At the RPC level, it's assumed that the upper layers have done whatever safety checks need doing, and the RPC is just communicating the intent. But I buy that there may be a driver that literally can't support deleting the constituent members one by one, and you have to delete them together, in which case that necessitates the existence of the RPC. It's just a question of should it have its own capability, or should it be mandatory? And
we don't have anything that is mandatory, like create volume.
No, like
delete volume is not mandatory, right? But I don't know.
No, but like create delete snapshot is one capability, and if you support it, you implement both create and delete.
Create delete volume is also one. Yeah, okay, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's what I'm saying. Is we don't split them apart.
I think it makes sense to make them just one capability, because even those drivers you're saying they have to do individuals first, right? So they can still implement this, but in this case, basically just require all the individual snapshots to be deleted already. But actually, Ben, do you know anyone who is like this, who have to delete individual snapshot? Because I do not know anyone who is like this. But I know,
but I know that, for example, NetApp can delete the individual snapshots, because when you take a CG snapshot, you just get a bunch of snapshots.
That's okay. So it's basically, it is possible, but it's not. But they can still do the delete group snapshot, can they?
Well,
any driver that cannot do this, I guess that's my question.
The question is how much tracking information they're going to need to know who the members of that group were, right? Because if the underlying implementation is just take a bunch of snapshots of all these volumes and make sure they happen at the same point in time, but then once you're done, you forget about the fact that those snapshots were ever related to each other, then someone later comes back and says, hey, I want you to delete this group of snapshots, you may have no record of what members of the group are. And so doing it this way puts a
your driver
requirement
should
that-
know that, right? Are you saying your driver do not know?
I'm saying that it's
Get
not
messed up?
necessary to know. And this creates a requirement that the driver knows, even if it isn't necessary.
But the driver should know. That's what I'm thinking. Well, we're also trying to make our RPC easier, right? So
Yeah. But
if delete, like if every driver can support delete volume group snapshot, then I'm just saying, why do we want to support this, additional thing? Allow them
it would
to
be
Sounds like
easier
I
if
think, yeah, Ben's argument really is like, hey, there probably are, and in fact, it seems like there is drivers that don't track the volume group ID after snapshot creation, right? So it's like take these group of volumes, create snapshots. After the snapshots are created, there is no record of that they were related to each other, and they're treated as individual snapshots. And so now if we say, hey, we require you to have a group snapshot ID, this is a net new thing that the CO needs to invent, right? They need to track somehow a new type of volume snapshot group ID and track it along with these volumes. So this is net new additional work.
But this is fine. This is the same as the volume ID or snapshot ID. If you don't have it, you can just use the whatever Kubernetes passed to you, the name.
But it's a requirement to store state. And traditionally we haven't put requirements to store state on the SPs. So like if the delete volume group snapshot RPC not only included the group ID, but also included the list of all of the snapshot IDs, then that would make it trivial, right? Because then all the state management would be on the CO side. The driver wouldn't have to do anything. It could just implement that delete group by, here's the list of 10 snapshot IDs that I need to delete. I'm going to ignore the group ID and just go iterate over those 10 snapshots and delete them. Then you'd be fine. But if you don't pass in the individual snapshot IDs, then you're requiring the SP to store that somewhere so that later the delete can be handled. And I don't know. Having been involved in writing CSI plugins for drivers that were trying to be stateless, but couldn't be stateless because of things like this, it's kind of maddening. So we would be doing driver authors a favor by passing down this.
So we could,
list.
if that's a concern, we could, add a list here. In addition to group snapshot ID, we can add.
Maybe that's the thing that makes this way easier to do is we pass down both.
Just add a comment.
Because Kubernetes will have both in every case. Right?
Not allow me to add anything there. Oh, weird. All right. Okay, so maybe we will just maybe that will solve this problem. We'll just add the
list of members, snapshot ID.
Right. Okay. Oops. I don't know if Assad is taking notes. Then we can just add that.
Yep. Yeah, I'm taking notes.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe that will be the solution. We just pass that there. Assad always take really great notes. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Oh, that's a lot of notes. Okay, great. Okay, good. So we'll just say in delete group snapshot. But these request. Okay.
All right, cool. Thank you, Xing. Thank you, Ben. Anything else on that topic or on this PR? Okay, if not, then we can switch over to Ivan's topic. Ivan, you want to drive?
Yeah. Hi everybody. So yeah, I'm hoping to hang on a sec. Xing, you're still sharing your screen. Yeah. So Thanks. Yeah, hoping to get some advice on like my ongoing change block tracking cap. I know like many of you on the call has been involved with providing feedback last year, and so just want to give a quick updates and then see if there's a possible way forward with it. As a quick refresher, the idea of change block tracking is that like we want to be able to provide backup software with a mechanism to like optimize and be more efficient with a backup the volume backup operation, like right before like the backup an entire volume. The backup software would send out a query to like some CBT or change block tracking service and say, hey, give me like a set of blocks that have changed on this volume between these two snapshots. And then like just so that I can back up like only those kind of change blocks. So late last year around October, we got some feedback from Sega Architecture. The main concern still revolves around like the potential amount of CBT payload traffic that can flow through like the Kubernetes control plane. And so whether we implement it as like a CRD controller, an aggregated API server, or even some form of like independent REST endpoint, like those kind of change block metadata traffic can potentially be huge. Say if we look at a volume of 1 terabyte, 10 terabyte, if the volume remain uncapped, and if everything on the disk change, which we know is unlikely but possible, like all of this traffic will still flow into like the Kubernetes in cluster network, right? And with controller and aggregated API server, the payload will flow through the Kubernetes API server. And I think Clayton like specifically mentioned that he recommend against the controller or aggregated API server.
Wait a minute. My last memory of this is we said don't store it in etcd because etcd can definitely not handle this level of traffic, but we were hoping that like an aggregated API approach might be good enough, right? Because that keeps it out of etcd. Now are we saying that even that is not okay because the data is still going to touch API server?
Yeah, well, with because the idea is like, so like say like if we like I think like Jan like did some math there as well. Like say if we're talking about like hundreds and something potentially gigabytes of payload coming back, and then we try to paginate that, even if we don't store it in etcd, we can still imagine like it being like multiple requests and response pairs like flowing through the backup server and the aggregated API server through the Kubernetes API server, right? So the Kubernetes API server will be proxying all this request and response just to handle that one backup CBT request. So and I guess like there are multiple variables there, right? Like unless we said there's a hard cap on like the volume size that we support, or there's like the block size of the CBT, all of this would have an influence on how much like metadata and how much response and request and response that will be paginated between the client and the provider. So
but
yeah,
I mean, so at some point, like you're in your 10 gigabyte or 10 terabyte volume where the whole thing has changed from one snapshot to the next, like there comes a point where like CBT becomes useless, right? Like in that situation, you don't want a differential snapshot. You want to do a full for your backup. So like, what if you just said there's some arbitrary cutoff, like change block tracking will give you up to 1 million blocks, and if more than 1 million blocks have changed, we'll just return an error and say change too large, and then you have to backup software has to resort to a full in that situation because it wouldn't be that efficient to try to do a delta anyways, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could say, look, this is for situations when the delta is relatively small, and if the delta gets out of hand, there's no point in using it. Just use a full.
Mm-hmm. I think that's
Would that alleviate the concern if we just drew a line somewhere?
yeah. I think like that is definitely a good one there. Is we had that we yes we brought this up during the working group discussion. I think like having some sort of cap would definitely help to tackle this problem.
I mean, could you also do like variable block sizes such that, you know, if you had a 10 terabyte volume and every block had changed, you would just return one change block, which starts at 0 and ends at 10 terabytes and say it's changed, and call it a day? Like, can we do stuff like that?
Yeah, so that one is a bit interesting. Like the I guess the short answer is like we don't know. Like because like say because like say imagine like if the you know the storage level layer give us back like you know blocks like 1 to like 500, like there has to be some assumption that we have to make saying that you know like index 1, 5, 10, whatever this, you know, are they sequential or are they like, you know, not sequential before we can compress that and say actually yeah 1 to 500 is actually one block that change and stuff like that. So I think like having some sort of cap like Ben, as you mentioned earlier, is would help to like definitely tackle like I think the heart of the problem. I think like the thing that like we have to decide on is like what does that cap look like? And for some providers, like for example AWS EBS, right? Yeah, CBT is like 512 KB bytes per block, which is different from the EBS block size. I think like what I guess like it kind of varies from providers to providers. So if we sell like 1 million blocks, it might mean different things across providers, which is not the end of the world. But I guess it's just more unpredictable. Like some threshold that is meaningful for some provider may not be meaningful for other providers, for example. And then also like we have to make assumptions about like the cluster capacity. You know, some clusters, if they are well provisioned, like 1 million blocks of again a refresher metadata, not the actual block, might be okay, but some others may not be okay. Do we make it configurable? Like it all open up like a whole like configuration space there the user has to be aware of.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, no matter how you do this, right? Even if we could come up with a different networking architecture, a different RPC API mechanism, you're always going to run into the problem of, you know, at some point, if you're swamping your backup software with just the amount of metadata that's getting thrown around, not to mention, you know, the actual data that needs to get backed up, like that's just bad resource usage, right? And at some point, you need to say, okay, we're wasting time processing this metadata. We should just be doing full backups for some subset of cases. And you're right, like where you draw that line is going to be different in every deployment. And that makes it kind of hard, but I don't know, you could put some sort of a tunable in maybe so that someone could tune it up to a higher number, but it could default to something reasonable.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think like the main concern is, from at least my understanding from what the SIG architecture has expressed, is like you know, like we don't want like this CBT service to be that single point of failure, I guess, to like take down the control plane and then just for the user to come back and say, oh yeah, you know, this is that one component that took down the cluster. Now we can tune in this parameter, right? So I think that, but I for sure like I think there's definitely a lot of value in having like the response payload. The other thing that I mean like the second discussion thread is like we have that is on sort of ongoing is also like can we not rely on passing this response back via networking, but use like a something like a volume populated approach. So it's like, you know, we get the CBT payload, but we write it to a volume, and then the backups, and then we can still have that cap that say, hey, you know, if there's more than 1 million blocks, you might as well just back up the whole damn thing. but like, you know, we use a volume populated approach to provision a volume, and then the backup software can decide like when they want to, you know, how and when they want to mount that PVC containing the CBT metadata when it's ready.
I don't like the idea of like actually writing it to a volume, because that could get really expensive for certain cases. I mean, where something like CBT is going to shine is when you have a huge number of volumes that are themselves relatively large in terms of bytes, but where the daily churn is relatively low, right? And for those, you want to be able to quickly just say, okay, compare today's snapshot to yesterday's snapshot, find the 5% of blocks that changed, and just send those to my backup system. You're going to be able to churn through that real fast. And I don't know, I think the common case here is going to be that there's not a lot of data flying around. It's just, of course, you have these pathological edge cases where you do have high churn, and differential snapshots are not the best way to back up those volumes, and you need a way to know which of those volumes those are. And so having a cap that says, oh, you know, you went over the cap, maybe differential snapshots are not ideal for this particular volume.
I think like with yeah, like I think like the concerns around like the volume populated approach where we have to write to this definitely came up as well. I think like the trade-off there is like stability over like performance. But yes, I guess like to your point, like if the writing IO itself takes a long time, then it kind of defeat the whole purpose.
Well, and you can imagine like taking hourly snapshots and having thousands of volumes, and if your communication mechanism is to create a volume, you could be creating hundreds of thousands of volumes a day and deleting them just for the purpose of like doing a couple of backups, which seems kind of crazy. Yeah, I mean, there does come a point at which that starts to seem attractive for very huge pieces of metadata, but one hopes that this feature is used on the other end of the spectrum, where it's just a handful of blocks, and it's no big deal to transmit them over the network, because that's where this feature is such a huge win, is when the amount of data is small.
Yeah.
And there really are situations where people take like hourly snapshots and you know, want to, I don't know if they actually back up each hourly, but you could imagine it, right? Especially if the deltas are very, very tiny between each hourly snapshot, you might just do it.
Yeah, it's not an unreasonable like use case where they do like even like, to be honest, backup you know, every like couple of hours. I definitely seen that in some of our users, where the frequency is actually for whatever reasons it's a little bit higher, frequency higher more often than usual. Okay.
You certainly see snapshots taken hourly. I don't know
Yeah.
about backups taken hourly as well, but
yeah. Okay, I think like okay, yeah. Does anyone have any thoughts on it? Thanks, Ben. I think like those are very valuable like feedback. Does anyone else have any thoughts on it, like in the remaining time that we have? Okay.
Was that the main topic you wanted to talk about, Ivan, or was there anything else you were hoping to cover as well?
No, I think that's basically it. You know, I just want to get a general idea of like you know, like see how people on this call feel about it. I think like having like the response may just be the you know, the way, another way forward with this for now. Like instead of I mean like we explore like different ways of having some different internal, I guess, more compact representation, like, you know, using bitmaps, using like some sort of range thing. But I think like those are hard to make generic because it requires like the CBT sidecar or whatever to know what the index or the offset mean if they and across different providers. So I think having it just like kind of help to remove all the complexity around like coming out with another form of internal representation, you know. So like, okay. Yeah,
so I will say that, you know, if putting a cap like doesn't alleviate people's concerns, and the concern is just we don't want any significant amount of data to go through API server, like you can imagine trying to come up with a different API architecture that, you know, routes around the API server to take it out of the bottleneck, but you'll still have all of the same problems of, do I want gigabytes of metadata flying around between my storage system and my backup system all the time? So I feel like you have to solve this problem whether API server is involved or not.
Yeah, exactly. I think like, you know, at the end of the day, we might just have to go back to like, if you recall, like our initial proposal where we have that 2-hop approach where we provide some sort of endpoint for the backup server to consume. I think that might just, that would take the API server out of the equation completely, but that might just be like the only way to address like the concern that SIG architecture has. So yeah, but yeah, to your point, like we still have to like, okay, do we want that amount of data to flow through like the Kubernetes like in cluster network, you know, like etc. etc. Okay, no, I think that's all I have. Thank you so much for the feedback. Appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks a lot for the discussion, Ivan. With that, any other items folks want to discuss before we end? We've got exactly 1 minute left. Okay, thank you so much for the nice discussions. Please take a look at the notes and take a look at the PRs offline and comment on them if you have any concerns. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.